am Nongebo Vukile Mackenzie, and this is the podcast, Sawubona. Every fortnight, a guest joins us for a conversation or to share a story. It's a pleasure to share these with you and to have you with us. Welcome, Ngiyakwamukela, to another episode of Nongebo Mackenzie, the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we're joined by Dr Balungile Zondi. She is a lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, but that is just what she does as a function. She has got a PhD in anthropology, a master's in policy and development studies, honors in policy and development, and honors in sociology, as well as a degree in development and anthropology, which she got from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. It's always so amazing to speak to women scholars because it just goes to show how broad a spectrum we as women can embrace. And it's always a pleasure speaking to you, Dr. Zondi.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here.
Ngikumbula, we spoke in 2018, and I'll never forget the conversation that we had because it was about your research study, your PhD research study. La wawukhuluma khona, or rather wawukade ubheke impilo ephilwa abantu besifazane abahlala emgwaqeni ePietermaritzburg. And I remember you said something that's always been so profound. It changed the way engibuka ngayo abantu abahlala emgwaqeni, because you think bahleli nje, and you said there's a structure,
yes,
and there's a system.
Yes.
And because when wagcina usuhlala khona, not uphela ukuthi you're a street dweller, but to do your research. Ngaqeda ukuthi nje yazi kwagcina sekumnandi emgwaqeni ngabona ukuthi ngahlaleka la. So it definitely changed my perception, because you think ukuthi umuntu ohlala emgwaqeni they're just moving around arbitrarily, and that's not the case.
Yes. Let me just give you a bit of a background, what really inspired this PhD study. As anthropologists, we really do take notice of everything that happens in our societies. Mm-hmm. We often say we leave no stone unturned, so because in each and every behavior pattern that you see or incident, obviously there are thick descriptions. There is a deep-seated narrative, Mm-hmm. So it actually helps us not to draw wrong inferences, but to be guided by lived experiences. Mm-hmm. So growing up in Pietermaritzburg, and every time we go to town with my dad and with my both parents, I will see these young girls. At the time I was still a girl, but then I was like, they are ugly girls as literature would define them, But when I then pursued my PhD, I said, I've been told that they are ugly girls, they are wrong girls and stuff like that. But now that I'm an anthropologist, it changes the whole perspective of viewing and receiving a human being. Mm-hmm. So now I needed to step out of the thinking that I have and then be part of their lived experiences. So in anthropology, we say you are tapping in their emic realities, where you see them and visit them in their natural in their natural spaces. And it happened that their natural spaces are those road corridors that many of us will see them, daily surviving on.
But from what you're saying, kuvela several things. I like how you said they are ugly girls as literature.
Yes.
I like that qualifier, as literature would define them, because they are defined that way based on how we observe them now, but we don't know what's happened. We don't know what came prior. We don't know what led to that person being there. But also just how you're defining anthropology as, you've got to, in layman's terms, walk in their shoes.
Yes.
I was speaking to a young lady, Unogwanda Kwela. She was in your second semester class, and she had joined as Ogwenzangi first year. A lot of the courses are similar.
Yes.
And her initial idea in going to Pietermaritzburg to UKZN, and then she went to your second semester lectures, and she has decided that she wants to major in anthropology. So that is the influence of how you are able to articulate. You change the entire trajectory of a young person's life, because from that exposure, from your studies, from your work, because then she went and she read up about you, because when I said to her, when she said, oh no, sengizomeja nge-anthropology ngisezokwenza i-law. And I was like, oh, do you know Dr Balungile Zondi? And she says, yes, she took me for second semester, and that's why I sang Shinjili. And again, it's that whole wanting to inquire and do inquiry about people's lived experiences. But Sikuluma, it was 2 years before COVID. It was 2018.
It was 2018, yes.
And has anything changed? Have there been any shifts? Tina siyababa sithi Nkosi sekwabanje asikhulumi nangabantu sithi sekwabanje eThekwini sekwagcwala labantu la eThekwini. And if you consider that from a lived human experience, what have been the shifts?
We will all recall that COVID-19 is one of the pandemics that really caught all of us off guard. When it happened, it reminded me that, you know what, I wish I could have published earlier, a section in my thesis where I am talking about their social well-being on the street, because that part of my thesis would have prepared an intervention that would have saved them, in the era of pandemics, because I believe that they were excluded from the interventions that were directly benefited by ordinary human beings like me and you, because the society would, when defining who is a normal human being, they don't go as far as conceptualizing who they are, apart from them being abantwana bangcolile, abantwana bangezwa bahlala emgaqweni. And again, I realized that while we were catered, they were not catered in terms of their safety, in terms of ensuring that their health and underlying, morbidities, were well cared. As a result, when I go around, because they're still my friends, that I must say, they're still my babies, they still call me mom,
So do you still go?
I still go. And it really saddens me when I go and I get to be told that so and so passed, during COVID times.
But here's what I'm curious about. So there are people whose long-term experience of life is the street, because by the time you published in 2018, obviously a PhD takes a certain number of years of research, your data collection, your findings, your recommendations, your examination process, and then you publish. So there'd been a number of years that had been spent on that. And then we have the conversation in 2018. We are now in 2024. Are you, honestly, because if you look at that, that's a minimum of what, 8 to 10 years?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, they are. They are still identifying with the streets.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, is that what it's called, identifying with the streets?
Yes, they're living on the streets because, they don't have alternative spaces. For many reasons. But again, maybe I'll just park the conversation. Maybe you would lead me there. But again, coming back to the era of COVID-19, and it really did affect them badly. And I don't think when we were enumerating the number of people who succumbed to COVID-19, if they were included in those statistics, majority of them died. And their bodies, I'm told, by those girls and boys on the streets, that some of their bodies were never recovered.
But now, here's what I'm curious about. A lot of them still have family.
Yes.
A lot of them. You did explain, and I would encourage whether a person is an academic or not an academic, because this forms part of a big part of what we see on a daily basis. And a lot of the people that we interact with, yes, whether uhamba ngetekisi or not, you will, there's a greater chance
that you'll come across.
Will come across. And it helps you to really understand the dynamics and the forces that are at play. If you do read, there are abstracts that are written about your work. There are distilled versions that just explain, what it's about. There are, synopses on it. So it's possible to read it in a non-academic fashion as well and understand it. But what for me becomes interesting is that they identify. So does that mean that it sucks you in Because if they've still got family, because omunye umuntu isimanga le ingane uyazi ukuthi kuphilwa kamnandi kanjani kubo angazi ukuthi waxatshaniswa yini nekhaya abanye baze bafuna ukuthi babenzele amasiko angisho ukuthi ku wrong lokho but in trying to intervene kodwa konke lokho akusebenzi kukhulekwe kuthiweni umuntu alandwe ayisho kuma psychologist aphinda abuyele and all of that. So when you say identify with the street, what does that exactly mean? That's where they feel comfortable?
Yes, that's where they feel comfortable. That's where they meet other peers who share a similar struggle. Because, I mean, they do not just wake up and decide to go to the street. You know, I remember there was a girl that I had. Okay, let me just also mention that when I said they come from families, it's quite a diversified conceptualization of families. Others, they do come from nuclear family where it's a stable household. There's a mother, there's a father. Others, they come from extended family where there's an uncle, malume, auntie, granny, and stuff like that.
But there's no mother and father.
There's no, there's no biological. Others, they come from uncle-headed families, you know. Others, they come from boyfriend-headed family. What do I mean by boyfriend? So when I meet a lover, and I'll take my child to go and stay in that family, and then I die. So my boyfriend continues to be a father figure, you know, but it's still not there. So when then life happens, you know, they run away because there are push and pull factors. You know, one of the push factors is that others, they even come from child-headed families, you know, when you suddenly wake up and being expected as an elderly child at home to now resume responsibilities of caring for your siblings, you know. So, and no one had prepared you for that because you thought that you would forever have parents. So in order to escape, they run to the street, you know. So as time goes on, when they first land on the streets, it's not an easy settlement, so to say, you know. But over a period of time, they live there. That's when they identify with the street because they do not have alternative spaces. You know, they work on the street. They sleep on the pavement. So it becomes a whole life that they understand. It's like when I did my ethnographic study, they told me that they are operating in their world. You know, a street is an invisible world for them. To them, we think they are part of a society that we are seeing, yet when they are in their small world. That is why for them it is easy for them to survive and sustain themselves for as long as they are there, because they are trying to hide from quite a number of bitterness that push them from wherever they come from. Others, it's because they've been raped, and the family tried to conceal that, you know, because you've been raped by a malume, and umalume happens to be uputigama. So you do not report such cases, you know. Others, they've constantly been reminded that when you've lost your mother because of this, that. So whatever that caused her mother or to die becomes her identity, you know. That also reminds me of the recent graduation that I had, where my PhD student was also labeled by what caused the mother to die. So others, you know, psychologically it becomes too much. So for them, it's like, ngiyafuduka, ngiyoqala ezweni elisha, you know, where I'm going to be received as I am, you know. Sometimes they don't even get the opportunity to know each other prior becoming a community member of the street, you know, but they're just being received on the basis yokuthi sewufikile. So let's just teach you how to survive on the streets.
So here's what I'm curious about. If it's a hard adjustment, and I ask this genuinely,
yes,
if it's a hard adjustment, and I understand what you're explaining, people go through gruesome things,
true,
at the hands of family, and unfortunately, they're often in a position where they've got to conceal that. Whereas the law requires that it's reported. What is legal and what we do are two different things.
True.
Legality and principle are two different things. Now, I fully understand that. What is it that makes it better? Ngisho ngathiwa kunzima kangakanani ngingancamela ukuhlala emgwaqeni kunokuthi ngibuyele ekhaya.
I remember in 2018, I told you that in Nami, doing my ethnography there, I found myself, finding comfort. It's how street life is enjoyable, especially, and it's therapeutic, so to say, to someone who has gone through a gruesome socialization or growing up path, because there, at least you are living your life, you're not being reminded that you are an orphan because your mom died of this, that, and no one tells you that if unga cleananga, you're not going to get a plate, So you are just for them. It's just, closing a chapter and starting a new chapter, And when they are there, it's not that they are still having it nice. They navigate, because there are quite a number of risk factors. They risk being abducted by those that are, prostituting young girls,
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking, yes. And so it's not easy. But over a period of time, because they form networks, these networks, they're part of ensuring their security, So that is how they then identify and settle, under those conditions. That is why they eventually then identify with, then create plots on the streets, because I've stayed here for 6 years. Is
there ever a desire to, because angiti tina that go home to a structure on a daily basis.
Yes.
That go home to an arrangement that we define as the normal society arrangement,
yes.
Right? We believe that that's what everyone aspires to.
Yes.
That's what we believe. Is there such a desire? So, for example, one of the things that, we spoke about was that they have their own little households.
Yes.
So what we see as what used to be a gazebo for a company
yes.
is now somebody's home.
Yes.
And there's mattresses and there's
yes.
all of that there. And that's now, I don't know if I should say a temporary, because to them it's not temporary.
It's not temporary.
I don't know if I should call it a mobile home, because for them it's not mobile.
It could be.
It's their state.
Yes.
Okay.
It depends on what they have in mind, whether they are planning to migrate.
Do they have a desire though to say ngiyafisa nami ukuba nendlu yami ye-RDP, ngiyafisa nami ukuthi mhlambe ngibuyele emakhaya ngiyozakhela nje uthi-room wami, ngiyafisa nami ukuthi ngiyoyiqashela i-room? Do you ever get a sense that it's for them a place? Yes, it's been comfortable to escape what I needed to escape, but I was escaping en route to somewhere. Or does it become...
Well, my research didn't go as far as that. But I think it probes, it intrigues us, a continuation to say, now that probably you have lived here for 15 years, what are your aspirations? Now that you are growing up. And I think it will be interesting to really pursue that. Now that I told you, one of my girls is happily pregnant, she's happily pregnant on the streets. So obviously that should change her perspective, because she's going to be a mother,
But what about primary health care? What about postnatal? What about?
Well, in my study, I did touch on those things, drawing from a Maslow hierarchy theory, where I was questioning a lot whether they do have access to sexual reproductive health, love security and stuff like that. There's nothing that they are directly benefiting, and that was also their lived experiences even during the COVID-19, because after COVID-19 since you asked, I had to go back and check, how did they survive? That's when I got told, because we did not have access to sanitizers, we still did not have access to clean water. We could not sanitize, we could not clean ourselves. That is why, Tina, even when we wanted to access health facilities, we're still stigmatized and chased away because, Tina, we come there stinking and not clean. So that then becomes. So now that, coming back to your question to say, are they hoping for a better life then it appears as if you are taking them back to a community that is not willing, to accept them, because when they left it was not only the family that posed judgments on them, but even the community at large, you know, because izingane ezingabekezeli, you know. So for them, I would say majority of them, they do not have alternative reasoning, you know, but they're just waiting ukuthi mhlambe bahambe emhlabeni or a miracle happens, because part of my data analysis worked out a rehabilitation framework to say, wouldn't you want to be rehabilitated so that there's family reunification?
Yes.
You know, some of them, they would say, I will not go there for as long as usore and so esaphila, because I still cannot face. And the others would go as far as saying, if I'm not Lisa for the things that the person did to me, I can safely go, you know. So it's quite a lot of issues that they would want. Coming back to checking, as you asked, whether as they are on the street, do they want to go? They are caged by the life that they live.
Just like you were saying, it's got invisible walls.
Yes.
We might not see them, but there's definitely containment there. You've said that before.
So, definitely, where do you want to go? You want to go home, right? But when you want to go home, you won't get the freedom that you are getting here, and it pulls you back, you know. And it reminds you that how am I going to be received by the family, because I've been told to say and obviously I'm not going to cope, you know.
But also there's certain structure, there's certain responsibility, and I'm not saying they're running away from responsibility, but their responsibilities have been reconfigured to staying alive. Firstly, let me stay alive. Secondly, let me get something to eat. Where am I going to sleep? All of that. Now there's a responsibility yokuthi phela makathi ugeza ubavu uyaclean.
Yes. And apart from that, I've got a lover now here.
Oh.
Yes, I've got a good life planned here.
But you know what always amazes me, Dr. Zondi? I'm sorry. Ngisho kungathiwa umuntu miyisa kuphi emhlabeni owakephi unjani. Akekho umuntu ongavumbuki nesithando.
Yes.
I would never imagine ukuthi, because I'm thinking, if you're thinking of all the things okufanele uyivike mawuhlala emgwaqeni.
Yes.
And I say this with a lot of ignorance because I do not know anything about living on the street. I am amazed that ngingafuna isithando.
Oh my God. There are couples there. They are couples. They function like how normal human beings function.
And I suppose because we look at it through our normal realms, sizokhiphana, sizodla, sizobambana izandla, sizohlala sixoxelana iy'nkinga. I suppose it's configured differently.
Yes, interestingly.
This is very intriguing.
Yes, it is. Some of them there on the street, it is not that they would wake up. They would resume a role of being a housewife. The partner would go and fend on the street, you know, ensure their survival ways of living, right? While yena eselila, tidying the space so that ubaba, when he comes back,
so that gazebo and that mattress, that
like how a makoti ongasebenzi would behave.
Goodness.
Yes. So because they've got quite a number of coping mechanisms, and we all know that majority of times they will bazoba on some, you know, drugs and stuff like that. So the boyfriend will make sure ukuthi, I know what at this time I supply my baby.
Oh my God.
They are so romantic.
Ngendlela yabo idingo bona abanazo bayazazi and oh my goodness.
And even they have, you know, their sanitary needs, they get provided by their boyfriends, who would be seen pushing trolleys for ordinary human beings behamba bema-taxi renkini, or working as car guards, you know, or doing, you know, quite a number of economic activities that a young boy on the street would do, you know. And so it's like they living.
so our perception of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The safety, the security, the provision, and they find a way to structure or to meet it ngokama resources are available.
That's quite correct.
So, you know, before we end the conversation, there's something so important that you said, that I think a lot of us need to think about. Whether you're a grandmother, whether you are married, whether you're divorced, whether you are partnered up, because at some point you might be faced with this decision, or the decision might face your family. Boyfriend-headed households, I'd never heard of that, and I'd never thought of it. But when you explained it and it crystallized, that is something that I don't even have a descriptive word for it, but it's something that's so important that we need to think about, because look, there's no guarantees in any situation where you form a partnership of any kind.
Yes.
But I can just imagine, and I think from this conversation, I mean, it's been such a rich conversation of what we've spoken about, but I think outside of the street dwellers, outside of the everything else, that's something that we really need to consider. What are we setting up for our kids in terms of the living arrangements that we are creating now, and the relationships that we are creating now, the relationships that we are destroying now, which means our kids don't have fallback positions.
True.
All of that we need to consider. And I really, really believe, I don't know how far you've delved into that and isolated that, but I believe that's something that deserves a conversation.
It does, and I haven't extended my research, beyond that, because it was quite a very interesting research finding to come to understand that apart from us understanding that there is only two types of family units or systems, which would be the extended, the nuclear, but now there's been an expansion, of these households where a mother would just decide to say another boyfriend. Obviously, they would be occupying an RDP, and then a mother dies. Then the father, that boyfriend, becomes an immediate father to the child, And then when the mother has passed, then a lot happens. Umntwana runs, not back to the family where the mother comes from, but prefers the streets. Yeah. So I believe that sociologists can actually look into that.
Yeah.
Social workers, anthropologists can, those who are interested in healing societies, or finding solutions, because this is a policy problem that we are facing. To say, why do we not include them? Why do we enjoy? I would say enjoy, because if we are not enjoying, we should be doing something.
About it.
But COVID came, nothing happened. They died on the street. Probably not many people knew that they existed, or they thought that they needed the interventions that were rolled out, So they continue to fall in between the cracks, Dr.
Zondi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Balungile Zondi, an anthropologist. She is a lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Pietermaritzburg, and one of the many hats that she wears is she's also the spokesperson for the National Social Cohesion Program, and that's how you can hear her passion when she talks about the policy, about the inclusion, and the importance of creating what I would say maybe are safety nets that can capture those that we call people who live on the fringes of society. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast. Remember, you can like the episode and share the podcast link, as well as listen to more episodes on the channel. Subscribe to the channel for more. Siyabonga. Thank you for listening.